All right, hello everybody, and welcome back to the Popular Music Books in Process series, a joint project of IASPM US, the Journal of Popular Music Studies, and the Pop Conference. I'm Carl Wilson, one of this season's series organizers, along with Elena Razlogova, Gus Stadler, Alex Vizi, and Eric Weisbard. You can find our whole calendar on the IASPM website under the Journal tab, and you can also catch up on videos of all of our past sessions on Eric's YouTube channel, including our most recent session with Liz Pelly, Brian Fatu, and Andrew DeWard talking about media fandom and finance in the streaming age. Our next event will be at the same time on April 15th, when we'll have Jessica Holmes and Dan DePiero on their respective works in progress, The Musical Vernacular of Depression and Big Feelings, Queer Feminist Indie Rock After Riot Girl, moderated by Robin James. But today we're very excited to be hosting a conclave of authors of books on single songs. As Eric put it, books about singles are the new books about albums. And as the author of 2023's Duke Single Series volume about Hound Dog, he'll be moderating this session, which features the authors of new books and books in progress, Maya Angelou Smith on Me Quitte Pas, Mike Barthel on Party in the U.S.A., and Jason Schneider on Hey Joe. Before we start, let me give you some additional background on today's presenters. Mike Barthel is a critic, writer, and researcher. His criticism has appeared in The All, Idolater, Flagpole, The Village Voice, The Atlantic, and GQ, while his academic research has appeared in the journals Journalism, Political Studies, Critical Studies in Media, Communications and Information, Communication and Society. As a senior researcher on the journalism team at the Pew Research Center, his work has been cited in state and federal legislation and covered by major media outlets. He received his MA in Media Studies from Syracuse and PhD in Communication from the University of Washington. His book in progress, Party in the U.S.A., will be published in the Duke University Press Singles Series. Jason Schneider has been writing about music professionally since 1994 and is regarded as one of Canada's most respected music journalists and historians. His previous books include Have Not Been the Same, The Can Rock Renaissance 1985 to 1995, co-authored with Michael Barkley and Ian Jack, Whispering Pines, The Northern Roots of American Music, and 2022's The Longest Suicide, The Authorized Biography of Art Bergman. For over a decade, Jason was an assistant editor at Exclaim, Canada's national music magazine, and his work has also appeared in numerous other publications. His book, That Gun in Your Hand, The Strange Saga of Hey Joe and Popular Music's History of Violence, is due out from Anvil Press at the end of May. Maya Angelou Smith is a sociolinguist, a professor in the Department of French and Italian Studies, and the Associate Dean for Equity, Justice, and Inclusion in the College of Arts and Sciences at the University of Washington. She's the author of two previous books, Senegal Abroad, Linguistic Formations, Racial Formations, and Diasporic Imaginaries in 2019, and 2024's Reclaiming Venus, The Many Lives of Alvenia Bridges. Her new book in the Duke Singles series is Ne Me Quitte Pas, a song by Jacque Brel and interpreted by Nina Simone and others. And finally, our co-organizer and today's moderator, Eric Weisbard, is, of course, a professor of American Studies at the University of Alabama, author of such books as Top 40 Democracy, Songbooks, and Hound Dog, co-founder and longtime organizer of the Pop Conference, and a former Village Voice music editor and Journal of Popular Music Studies co-editor. He is currently editing the Oxford Handbook of Pop Music. During their conversation, please post your questions as you think of them in the chat. In the last part of the session, Elena will call on you to unmute and ask them during the Q&A. And of course, we also encourage you to use the chat for comments and conversation. However, we'll ask the presenters to please ignore the chat during their discussion. We'll send them a copy of the transcript later so they won't miss anything. And that's more than enough from me. So Eric, please take it away.
All right. Thanks, Carl. And hi, everybody. Yeah, it's a big old set of songbooks, but these are books on specific songs by authors who really take different methods, different kinds of songs, different approaches. So I think what we'll be able to show here in our conversation is how many different ways there are to do this and why books on single songs, even though they may grow into multiple versions of that song or before and after versions, still have a different feeling than books on albums. So we're going to have our three presenters start with some opening remarks, Then I'll talk with them and they'll ask questions of each other. And finally, we'll turn it over to the audience for their questions, including perhaps such important things as why not my single? Um, so, yes, um, please let's get going. And I believe we said, Maya, that you would start us off.
Sounds good. Let me just share my screen. Um, okay, can everyone see my screen? Yep, great. Okay, thank you everyone for having me here. I'm so excited to be in conversation with this excellent panel, who I'm just meeting for the first time today. So I figured I'd talk a little bit about why I wrote this book and focus on some of the key features. Um, this is basically an opportunistic passion project. Um, I often ask myself, how did I, a linguist with no music background other than, playing upright bass in orchestra in middle school and high school, but not touching anything since then, end up writing a book about a single song? And so I really have to thank everyone in this group because I never would have written this book without the Popular Music Books in Process series. I first participated a couple of years ago when I was on a panel with Maureen Mann and Francesca Royster, and I had the privilege of presenting my work in process at the time, Reclaiming Venus, which was eventually published in October of this past year. And it was here that I learned about Duke's single series. And so I was daydreaming about all the songs I could do. And and especially because I was writing Reclaiming Venus, and it's all about Lavinia Bridges' life behind the scenes in the music industry with Roberta Flack and the Rolling Stones and her interactions with Jimi Hendrix and whatnot. And so all these songs were on my mind. But I kept going back to Nina Simone, who is my all-time favorite performer, musician. And then it was like, okay, if I were to write my dream book, what song of hers? And while there's so many, I landed on Me Quitte Pas, um, primarily because I'm based in as introduction said, I'm based in the French and Italian Studies department. And I was pretty sure that it'd be very hard to be promoted to full professor if I wrote yet another book that had nothing to do with French studies. But also, this book is so important, or this song is so important to me because it was the reason why I started studying French in the first place. And I started French in college, and it was because of Nina Simone's cover of Ne me quitte pas. And so it was an interesting choice to choose a cover, because we're talking about singles here, and I really wanted to do the song justice. And so um, I basically, the book is to tell the story of this song, and I do situate it. The introduction is about my experience with the song, but then the first chapter is going back to Jacque Brel, who wrote and composed the song. And so this book is really about how Ne me quitte pas travels across languages, geographies, genres, and generations. And in doing so, I analyze the song as a text, but also as cultural production written in a specific context, but that travels and is reinterpreted and recontextualized in multiple ways. So it's really a book about translation, but in the widest definition of the word. I go back to the Latin translatio, or this notion of being carried across. And a lot of my work in my previous book was all about mobility. And so I'm really bringing that theme forward, thinking about mobility of a song from its creation to its covering to its translation to its adaptation, and thinking about notions of authenticity and who has a right to claim a song through this song's journey. And so this first chapter is on Jacque Brel and how do you translate feelings into song form. So there's Jacque Brel there, in his sweaty performative self. Um, And then the second chapter is all about how does a song transform when sung by a different person in a different context. And I focus on Nina Simone's version, which is the one that I came to the song through. And then the third chapter is about translation. And so I look at Rod McKuen's translation, If You Go Away, and Shirley Bassey's performance of this, and what gets lost and gained both in the music and the lyrics, as well as the performance. And then there's Shirley Bassey there. And then the fourth chapter is about adaptation. And so what sort of meaning making happens when a song shows up in a different medium. And so I look at a few performances. One is by Sasha Velour and her drag performance of lip syncing Shirley Bassey's recording, and a Cirque du Soleil performance by a clown, Claudio Carnero and Verikai, who lip syncs Nina Simone's version. And so, very briefly, in the couple minutes I have left, I start off thinking about Jacque Brel's version, and he wrote it in 1959, after he broke up, or actually his mistress, Suzanne Zizou Gabriela, broke up with him for not leaving his wife and his family. And there's a lot of like toddy details around this breakup, but many read the song as autobiographical, and which lends an air of authenticity. And then you add Brel's performances to it. Again, I already mentioned his sweatiness, his cracking voice, his audible breathing, all these things that make it seem like he's lacking control and that the heartache seems real. And so I'm thinking about Brel's performance, particularly his 1966 performance in this chapter. And then I move on to Nina Simone's version, which again, it was the recorded version on her I Put a Spell on You album that brought me to the song. And I talk a little bit about sort of the role of French music, because actually this album has three French language songs on it. Tomorrow is My Turn and You've Got to Learn were both translated to English, but Simone bought the rights in 1962 from Charles Aznavour, who was a chanson artist. And then, of course, Me Quitte Pas, which is the only one in French that remains in the original French. And I spend quite a bit of time analyzing a 1971 performance that she did in France for a charity show. And I chose this one particularly because of her piano playing, which I found very important, but also because of her use of language in the song. And I asked in this chapter, what does it mean for a Black American English-speaking woman to sing the song of a white Belgian French-speaking man, both to the performer and the audience? And so in the minute I have left, I'll just point out to a couple of interesting things in this performance. One is that in the middle of repeating the refrain, the Me Quitte Pas, she throws in an "Oh Lord" in there that seems out of place. And so I'm really thinking about what does it mean for her to sing this song about basically unrequited love and to put a gospel feel in there, especially in 1971 when she is in self-imposed exile pretty much in France because of the fallout of her protest music in the U.S. I also spent a lot of time, and the chapter is entitled "Sorry About the Words, Y'all," because of Simone ends this performance saying, apologizing for her words, and really thinking about Simone's struggle with the language. And if you look at YouTube commentary on any of her performances of this song, there's a lot of discussion about whether she does the French justice and where she makes linguistic mistakes and things like this. And so it's interesting to see her sort of having this knowledge at the forefront of her mind when she's apologizing. So yeah, I will end there. I'm happy to talk more about other aspects of the book or go deeper into this part. But yes, this is my book.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And it sort of inverts my Hound Dog book in the Big Mama Thornton to Elvis, the Jacque Brel to Nina Simone. I wasn't positive which to start with, but I guess, Jason, if I'm right, that makes Brel a year or two earlier than Hey Joe. Tell about your book.
Yeah, well, yeah, there are a lot of similarities with what Maya just described as, the song having a journey. But in Hey Joe's case, it's I really kind of, well, traced it back to the earliest recorded murder ballads, all the way up to, well, the book is divided into two parts. The first part goes, from murder ballads up to Jimi Hendrix's version, and then the second part, each chapter discusses post Jimi covers in different genres. Patti Smith's first single to soul versions by Wilson Pickett and Lee Moses, reggae version by Black Uhuru, and all the way up to more recent covers by Nick Cave and Charlotte Gainsbourg. So, yeah, the whole, it was just a really fun process, for me, just to kind of delve into how this one song has really impacted, almost every genre. Oh, I forgot to mention Ice-T and Body Count's version as well, sort of combining rap and metal. So, I mean, you can't really look at any genre and not find someone doing a cover of Hey Joe. But the book really stems back to, Jimi Hendrix has always been my favorite artist from the first time I played my dad's copy of Are You Experienced when I was 10 years old. So after that, once I started discovering all these, other versions of Hey Joe, it kind of be, before Jimi as well. The book, tells the story about how the song became kind of the standard garage rock anthem in the mid '60s, in LA specifically. But yeah, it really kind of became an obsession for me. And as I was, putting together a list of different versions, to explore, the other aspect of the book became, you know, delving into the mystery behind the guy who got credit for writing it, a guy named Billy Roberts, who oddly enough never recorded the song himself, officially. He was part of the Greenwich Village folk scene. He actually arrived in New York almost exactly a year before Bob Dylan did. So he was really kind of part of this pre-Dylan scene where artists, really had no interest in writing their own material or even, recording it. So that's, another aspect of the book is kind of charting the rise of, singer, the actual concept of a singer-songwriter and how they, eventually realize that the money is made in publishing. So yeah, so those are really kind of the three aspects of the book: is charting the history of Hey Joe itself, sort of this, revolution within the music industry, and then chronicling, the life of Billy Roberts, who kind of still kind of remains a mystery. And I feel like I'm the book is presenting information about his life that no one has ever done before. So I'm pretty proud of that as well. So yeah, I think that kind of covers most of it.
Terrific. Yeah, I was thinking about that Billy Roberts moment of writing Hey Joe as being almost coterminous with Brel by a couple of years, maybe.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
if one was 59, maybe what was this, 61?
Yeah, 60, 61.
Something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Right before Dylan wrote "Blown in the Wind."
Mike, on the other hand, your song has very little to do with 1959 or 1961. Tell us about Party in the USA.
Yes, I'm happy to. All right, I'm going to share my screen here real quick. All right, so yeah, I'm here to talk about, can everyone see that okay? I should probably say that out loud since it's a Zoom meeting, I'm required to. I'm here to talk to you about Party in the USA, and I sort of wanted to use this as an opportunity to kind of pull out one thread of argument from the book. And also one of the really fun parts about this project was there's so much audiovisual material from this period. And, you know, I can describe it in the book, but it's sort of fun being able to actually show it to people because some of it's pretty wild. So Party in the USA was released in 2009, a few months after Barack Obama's inauguration. And it returns to the charts, the top 10 every July on the strength of digital downloads for Independence Day. Carl called it the All I Want for Christmas Is You of the 4th of July. And it's one of the few singles to have been certified diamond in the US. So in it, then Disney star Miley Cyrus thrice shouts the name of a figure universally understood at that point as a cautionary tale for young female stars like Miley, which is Britney Jean Spears. So when a teenage Britney broke onto the scene, she immediately faced interrogations about her body. Male journalist asked about her breasts. In a 1999 mall show, she mocks this discourse, coming out in this bulky parka and sort of ludicrously oversized sleeves, before then taking it off in a reveal to her normal crop top outfit. When her father forces her to go on Diane Sawyer to apologize for Justin Timberlake breaking up with her, the show runs this intro of shots of her belly, calling it the most valuable piece of real estate in the entertainment business. She becomes a tabloid fixture, and here you see the infamous Bimbo Summit front page of the New York Post, with Paris, Lindsay, and Britney. And usually you only see the top. When you see the full page, you can see that the bottom half is Sean Bell's murder by the NYPD, which the Post apparently thought to be co-equal news with 3 young women going out to the clubs, which I think is what we call foreshadowing for 2016. So when the pressure sort of eventually becomes too much for Britney, she lashes out specifically at a member of the media, a paparazzo who, and making clear that for her the enemy is the media, and as a result she's put under a conservatorship that will last for over 13 years. And this is the explicit reason that Hannah Montana was created. Disney wanted a wholesome, family-safe version of Britney that they could sell to their audience, and it was consistent with their brand values. And they cast Miley, who is already from a showbiz family, maybe hoping that she'd be a little less likely to flam out. The show is enormously successful for both Disney and Miley. The show breaks all kinds of rating records, and Miley ends up with 3 hit movies, 4 #1 albums, and 2 successful tours just in the 3 years between the show's premiere in 2006 and Party's release in 2009. It's a very strange situation where she is enormously famous among tweens and almost totally unknown among other people. But there's a widespread expectation that this won't last. In 2008, South Park airs an episode in which, following an Obama-Clinton debate, the townspeople ritualistically sacrifice Britney, mentioning that it's not just the press, everyone agrees she must die. And then turn to didn't meet that one. And then turn to Miley as their next victim. So it was understood that Miley was doomed. So to a certain extent, this comes true and the scandals begin to mount. Pictures stolen from her MySpace page cause controversy when she's seen cuddling with a male dancer. There's a gay panic triggered by a photo of her sharing a Twizzler with a female friend. And as she goes to release her first solo album, Breakout, she does a shoot for Vanity Fair with Annie Leibovitz, and the Post plastered it on their cover with the headline, Miley's Shame. So when she calls Britney's name out 3 times in Party, released the following year, it's in defiance of these expectations, invoking Britney not as a cautionary tale, but as a redemptive spirit. Unfortunately for Miley, however, this charm does not work. At the initial performance of Party at the Teen Choice Awards, Twitter, just then emerging as a cultural force, goes nuts that she ground on a stripper pole for dancing on the ice cream cart you can make your own decisions about what she was doing there. Disney threw her under the bus. Her bosses at Disney said, parents can rest assured that all content presented on the Disney Channel is age appropriate for our audience and consistent with what our brand values are. So Miley is then forced to apologize, showing that she doesn't have the power to control her own image without facing overwhelming criticism, both from the media and from her bosses at her job. The video they end up making for the song is fairly conservative, emphasizing the Americana of sort of pickup trucks, cowboy boots, and drive-in movie theaters. And the one moment in the video where she is on top of something is a swing with her hands firmly at her side. And so it feels to a certain extent like she's been controlled. I think they're supposed to be in a Thunderdome. I don't entirely know what this image is. But in the long run, Miley was the first of her cohort to break the curse to come back, and Party is the key that unlocks all of that, both in terms of clout and in reframing Miley's character. It argues that the true moral center in America isn't the judgmental media creatures in LA, but artists like Miley. And in this, it evokes Barack Obama, who'd been inaugurated earlier that year and whose campaign was in full swing when the song was written in 2008. Its description of a red state Nashvilleian, leery of blue state Angelinos, echoes Obama's 2004 star-making DNC speech, where he says there's not a liberal or conservative America, but the United States of America, and that this America is far better represented by Obama himself than a socially conservative Texan like George W. Bush. So pop music becomes an integral part of Obama's image. will.i.am produces the Yes We Can song and video, where celebrities sing and speak the words from Obama's New Hampshire speech alongside him. But this is an independent effort, not organized through the campaign, which keeps its distance, thinking that pop is the vulnerability for a presidential candidate. And indeed, his opponent, John McCain, runs an ad calling Obama the biggest celebrity in the world, comparing him here to Britney Spears and Paris Hilton, thus subbing him in for Lindsay Lohan in the Bimbo Summit. The assumption here is that pop music is not presidential. But it doesn't work. Obama, boosted by iconic images like this from his final rally in Virginia, wins the election, suggesting that maybe there is power in going on the offensive and insisting on your own particular image, rather than trying to find the least offensive median. This is a power that Miley desperately needs. After Party, she spends years in the wilderness with failed albums and movies, and she needs a model for how to push back to take control over her own image and to stop apologizing. This model is provided by Kanye West, who at the VMAs, a few weeks after Miley's Teen Choice Awards performance with the stripper pole, he gets on stage with Taylor Swift, and in the process gives white pop stars permission to engage in rapper-style beef. This is boosted by Obama himself, who in a hot mic moment calls Kanye a jackass for interrupting Swift. And this move is so obviously more effective than what Taylor Swift does the next year at the VMAs, extending this white saviory olive branch to West with the song Innocent. Over the next few years, artists like Taylor and Miley would learn the value of providing their fans the drama of conflict and victory over their foes, and you can see here in the Bad Blood video. So Miley uses social media as a route around the mainstream media that allows her to push back against the image she's been painted into. The backyard sessions that she posts on YouTube showcase her chops as a vocalist, authenticity in covering 70s hits like Look What They Did to My Song Ma, and links to her beloved godmother, Dolly Parton, as with her cover of Jolene, which becomes a massive hit and gets Pharrell Williams interested in working on her comeback album. In the video for the lead single, We Can't Stop, she's clearly done apologizing for her scandals, referencing here her stolen MySpace pictures as she cuddles with someone on a couch, and actively embracing her burgeoning queer identity. It's a classic example of what Robin James calls resilience, in which damage is spectacularly overcome. But power, of course, wants to expand beyond personal redemption, and to do that, Miley strikes out at others, bringing twerk into the vocabulary of white America, whether anyone wanted her to or not, lashing out at Sinead O'Connor and Amanda Bynes, who had been involuntarily committed to psychiatric care, and gets called out by Nicki Minaj for stunts like this. And you can see this shift in Party's performance as the finale on the Bangers tour. Instead of the conservative totems of the original video, which are drawn from her father, Billy Ray Cyrus's country music roots, she's now in control of her own image. But the problem, yes, wrap it up. So I'll stop it here. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, and there'll definitely be time as the conversation goes to get to other parts, but that was fascinating. Thank you. And I think people can immediately see that we've got very different approaches. So let me start with the thought about books on songs that they turn out to be more open-ended than books on albums because an album is a self-contained set of songs that sort of works on its own terms or doesn't. A song, as it makes its impact, does so in a multifaceted way. For years, collecting records, especially albums, but sometimes singles, was the essence of being a music fan. Now, following links between songs online and so forth is as much the essence of a music fan. Do you feel like part of the shift from writing about albums to writing about songs has for you all involved this, a sense that actually, even though it might seem on the surface like a more singular topic, it opens up in more of a multiplicity of directions? Who'd like to start?
Well, I'll say yeah because yeah, well the way I kind of structured my book, especially the second half when I'm talking about Patti Smith's Hey Joe and the soul versions, it really opened, yeah, like it opened up a lot of new context for me to explore as far as you know race and violence and misogyny during the 70s and 80s and the my the whole narrative kind of like revolved around that. So yeah, so for instance, with the reggae version, with Black Uhuru's version, I got to dive into you know the history of reggae basically and Jamaican politics and in the 70s. Of course, the assassination attempt on Bob Marley, and then that kind of developing into the rise of hip hop and the crack epidemic. So yeah, it just became this fascinating thing, and wherever I went, Hey Joe just seemed to kind of pop up naturally. It almost like a musical version of Zelig or something like that. It's like, oh, there it is, and it makes perfect sense in this context. So yeah.
Yeah, I can go. I was a little jealous of Jason that he had so much space to devote to the song because the single series it's 30,000 words, and I had a hard time keeping in that even though it was on a single song, right? Because there's so many directions to go, and with Brel's music, there's actually a website called brelitude.net, and you can go and you can find all the different covers of his songs. And so Me Quitte Pas is the most covered song. It's at almost 1,700 different versions of this in different languages. And because I knew I was coming to this song as a cover to begin with by having Nina Simone be my entree into it, I knew I had to sort of think about, how does this cover sort of sit with all these other covers and translations because it's also in like over 20 different languages as well. Um, and and yeah, and what's interesting is actually Brel's version is not the first recorded version of the song as well. So in 1959, and when he wrote it, this a female vocalist, Simone Langlois was actually the first to record it a few months before Brel did, but most people don't know that one. So then it's like, okay, well, then it's Brel covering his own song just because it wasn't the first one. And so then thinking about sort of order and timeline and who gets credited with being the original is the one that has the most impact. And then when you think about impact, impact for whom, right? Because Nina Simone's version obviously had the most impact on me, and probably for anyone who grew up with her music, that was the version that they knew. So yeah, I don't know. It's just it's really fun to go down all these rabbit holes and then have to constrict yourself because there's so much to say, even though it's just one song.
Mike, I got the sense that your project was a little bit different in that you had the rabbit hole of politics in music as much as the rabbit hole of version after version.
Yeah, it's I don't think it's been covered very much at all. And in the book I talk a little bit about how sort of weird it sounds as a song, especially for a song at the time. Yeah, a lot of the connections I was able to make were with these sort of media images or with political images, which yeah, definitely sort of a lot to work with, which was yeah hard to corral at a certain point because it was just yeah, I think like Maya said, just sort of a lot of things to say about it. So I was also jealous of Jason. Um, but you know, I'm a song sucker, and I guess I'm mindful too of how like for performers the song really is the unit, and when they go to perform a live set, they'll unless they're being paid to, they probably don't perform the album in order. They go and mix them up and make these new connections with different things.
Let me ask you some questions about the differing methods, and maybe Mike, while you're still here, I can help you get to sort of the parts that I might have cut off a little bit in your exposition, which is in thinking about Party in the USA, a moment of affirming Britney, a moment of a Nashville person affirming hip hop, a Barack Obama moment of politics. You're also now writing in the aftermath of Trump, in the aftermath of what's shattered in that sense of the history. So maybe, and I got the sense reading your draft in progress that that's still one of the parts that you're very much reckoning with as you're thinking about the legacy of Party in the USA. Is that fair? And how have you kind of approached it, given your dual career as someone who can pick apart a Fiery Furnaces song or analyze a Pew research poll?
Yeah, it's been a big challenge for the project, and there's been sort of a lot of revisions. I took my kids to like an indoor play space a week after the election, and was trying to like rewrite the book as they were going down like padded foam slides, because it obviously sort of changes the framing. Both in terms of what Obama means, what Biden means, sort of the role of pop music, given that this was sort of the brat election, and a lot of pop stars got involved. There became this expectation that pop stars would be expected to endorse a political candidate, which is like I sort of show in Obama. It was this sort of surprise when Will.i.am gets involved, but now Chapel Roan faced sort of pushback for not endorsing Harris. Um, so I think the thing that's interesting to me, I think, is about how cultural ways of thinking about meaning politics tries to sort of shut that out as sort of disreputable. But I think it's a large part of how people engage with politics, and sometimes that's a problem. As it's definitely been a problem with Trump, but I think there's also ways to think about it, um, that it may sort of benefit the causes that we all want to see benefit. So, yeah, I'm trying to work through all that for sure.
No small task. Maya, one of my favorite non-music writers writing about music pieces of writing is Lauren Berlant writing about Showboat, which she calls a super text and writes about the multiple adaptations of across different film versions and stage versions. And it seems to me that your project to a certain extent is very much in that vein. Translation, adaptation, circulation. And you presented some of that in your opening, but as you noted quickly without as much detail, we also have to think about what makes that wacko Rod McKuen part of the story, how it becomes a text for drag performance and so forth. So um, can you talk a little bit about how that sort of academic training you have in translation and thinking about these broader notions of cultural adaptation came to this project? It seems like it puts you in an interesting way in a great vantage point for what you were writing about that goes beyond just, oh, rabbit holes, and actually means you had a darn method.
I did have a method to it. I mean, I wanted to bring my expertise to it, right? And it was interesting when I took on the project, I actually did a songwriting certificate at Berklee College of Music online so that I could feel that I was doing the musical aspects justice of it. And it was something I'd been wanting to do for a while, so why not, right? But I also wanted to sort of think about issues that other works I have done have been thinking about. So translation being one, right? Because I mean, trained in a lot of my work is around multilingualism and how we move between languages. Um, I like that you brought up Rod McKuen. I mean, he in the third chapter when I'm talking about translation, I mean, he has a prominent role partially because he translated a lot of Jacque Brel's work. They were friends. He was devastated by Brel's death. They would go on tour together, they traveled together, they did all these things. So he knew Jacque Brel's work really well. But it was interesting to see, even though he knew Brel so well, how he translated his music, where some of the major critiques of McEwen's work is that it's very kitschy, you know, and Brel's work is not, and it's in the chanson uh, genre, which is all about sort of really complex literary references and linguistic techniques and all those things. And then you see if you go away and it's more flowery and it's this sort of Hollywoodized version of this song that people didn't appreciate and even more hopeful than the original, right? If you go away is this conditional that but you may stay. Where this other one is this sort of like imperative, don't leave me, please don't leave me. Uh, so really different feel to it. But I appreciated how you have this new world, right? And it doesn't matter what the original is, just like for covers, it doesn't necessarily matter what genre of the original was. It's all about, okay, how is it being taken up by the audience that you are speaking to? And that's something I think about a lot with cultural production, whether it's music or literature or film or whatnot. So it was great to bring in all these different aspects. You asked about, having a drag version, for example, and it was great to just think about Shirley Bassey, who really lends herself to drag in the way that her performances is. And actually, she also would study drag performances and took a lot of her sort of ways that she engaged with audiences from those performances. So it was this sort of two-way connection. And so it just made sense for to talk about that and appropriation, right? Because of lip syncing, for both Claudio Carnero, the clown, and for Sasha Velour to be lip syncing Black women. What does that do
Right.
as well? So those are different sort of threads through the book.
No, I mean, one of the things that's fantastic about that and brings me to Jason is that, Jason, I think in some ways you're working with some of the more traditional tools of the music historian, the music critic, in that a lot of what you do in your extra words, if you were going to refute these people saying, darn you and your 45,000 extra words, is you sort of set different scenes. You're not only telling the story about Billy Roberts, but you want us to understand something about the folk music world of perhaps Greenwich Village or Los Angeles or San Francisco. You want us to understand how that's a different world than the world of the rock perform. And so it seems to me that one of your goals in this book was not only, and you've talked about this a little bit, but I'll just push it a little harder, was not just to talk about Hey Joe as this Zelig that just keeps reappearing, but to notice that the terms on which it can appear at all are different because in different moments the rules of culture keep shifting. Does that feel like some of what you were trying to get at?
Oh, sure. Yeah. No, that's I couldn't have said it better, but yeah, it's well, I realized, I was working within kind of a milieu that's been, written about to death by, you name it. I'm not gonna try to step in there and try to just rehash what's been written before. So yeah, I really wanted to, and then drawing from my journalism background, I yeah, I really wanted to go places that no other writers I'd read before had gone. Yeah, I guess I was thinking again. Well, the chapter about Patti Smith's version. If people are familiar with it, she recorded it right at the height of the hysteria surrounding the Patty Hearst kidnapping in the mid 70s. So she really used her version of Hey Joe to sing in Patty Hearst's voice, essentially, and that was something no one had ever done before, and it was really interesting to kind of get into that. But then the other thing that really kind of galvanized the book for me was I was fortunate to connect with a woman named Niela Miller, who was Billy Roberts's Greenwich Village girlfriend when he first came to town. And when I got to speak to her, she was in her 80s, but she was a folk singer herself, and in the spirit of the times, they would share songs, and she had this song called "Baby, Please Don't Go to Town," which over the years, people have accused Billy Roberts of stealing that as the basis for Hey Joe. So yeah, I didn't want to just present everything is like cut and dried, like, okay, Billy wrote the song, then this person covered it. It was really this mystery that I really wanted to try to unravel. And yeah, in the end, I feel pretty proud of doing it, and I hope people read the book in that spirit.
Great. All right, I'm going to ask one last question and then turn it over to Elena, because I'm guessing, although I'm not allowed to look at the chats, that as the numbers are going up, that means there are questions in there. But I won't look. It might be looking back at me. Final question for today, to answer relatively quickly, even though it's the kind of question you could answer at length. What, at mostly the end of your book processes, entirely in the case of Maya, pretty much done for Jason, except for the publication and a little more work for Mike. Sorry, Mike. What question do you find yourself still grappling with a little bit? What are you still, having gone through this process, almost still saying to yourself, there's more thinking to be done on some aspect of my topic or my song? Mike, you want to start us off as the one with the most work to do?
Yeah, yeah. I think even as I was doing the presentation, it's sort of um, not like Miley Cyrus hero or villain exactly, but I think for people who weren't tweens in that era, our journey is probably like, oh, Miley Cyrus, she's a Disney kid. Oh, maybe she makes some cool music. And now you sort of gone back and forth. And I talked to people who are younger than me, and a lot of them honestly even had the same journey. Maybe they grew up and they liked her, but then they're like, oh, that's kiddie stuff. And then there was usually some moment, usually of her doing a cover, where they're like, oh, Miley Cyrus is cool. So she's done so much stuff over the years that, yeah, that sort of maybe value judgment or sort of overall framing device is what I keep going back to.
Excellent. Maya, you want to take a crack?
Yeah, sure. I had a book talk here in Seattle when it came out about a month ago, and one of the people asked me, "Oh, do you do the Stromae version of Ne Me Quitte Pas?" And Stromae is one of my favorite artists, but I decided not to do it because there was just so much, and I couldn't figure out that narrative arc in there. But to bring in the sort of the current sort of Belgian superstar covering Brel would have been great, but and so every now and then I'm like, oh, should I have devoted time to
Ah,
to him?
you threw that one back in the water.
I did.
Jason, you got the last word on this particular question.
Yeah, well, I guess, yeah, the challenge in finishing the manuscript was just, trying to not drive myself crazy thinking of any Hey Joe versions that I missed that I should have included. I did put together a fairly extensive discography, but yeah, I guess the question for me is, what happens next with Hey Joe? I mean, the most recent cover that's in the book is Charlotte Gainsbourg's version, which she did with Beck for Lars von Trier's film Nymphomaniac, and that really kind of turned the tables, turning the song into like a female revenge fantasy. So where the song can be interpreted from there, I don't know what'll happen next, but I'm fascinated to see if anyone can do something else with it.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you all three. I hope that gives folks a little bit of an introduction to the books and the authors and the topic. And Elena, I turn it over to you.
All right. So we have a few questions. Alex, do you want to start with yours?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm looking forward to reading these books. Eric's sort of framing comment about singles being uncontained in ways that albums are had me thinking about, and actually, Jason's comment sort of sets this up really well. I was thinking about soundtracks and music licensing and how singles kind of recirculate through television and film. I was reflecting in the chat about how, unfortunately, the first time I heard Hey Joe was in Forrest Gump. Specifically in the scene where Wesley beats up Jenny and Forrest saves her. I was like, oh, this is Jimi Hendrix. I've heard about him. So I was just sort of wondering, like, across the three songs and the three books, if there's any sort of instances of these songs showing up in soundtracks.
Yeah, so I don't think it's in the soundtrack per se, but I do talk about Pedro Almodovar's film The Law of Desire from 1986, I think it is. And Me Quitte Pas is throughout this film. It's both sort of a theme. It plays on one of the director's lovers. And so that's a song that plays with this one person. But it's also lip synced in a play that's within the film. And so I do this sort of deep reading into what's happening there. So it functions in different ways in this film. And he actually Almodovar uses Maisa Matarazzo's version. So uses a Brazilian singer, which is interesting as well, that decision. So yeah, I've never heard the soundtrack for this film, so I don't know if it shows up, but it's definitely prominently placed in the film.
Mike gonna jump in? Or?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So Party has people really like to parody it. So there's a Weird Al version called Party in the CIA, which kind of comes off a little brutal now. There's the Party in Canada one. I think I'm pretty sure my kids found a version called Farty in the USA at one point, which they then made me listen to before I like had to make a house rule of no more Farty in the USA. But the only soundtrack I can remember it ended up in the Purge election year, which I guess kind of speaks to sort of how Miley thinks about the song now.
And I totally forgot about the Forrest Gump needle drop. that was something. But yeah, it's aside from Nymphomaniac, I'm not can't really think of too many other soundtrack drops. I mean, when you talk about Jimi Hendrix, on soundtracks, it's usually all along the Watchtower. So but see, now you've given me something more to kind of look at, see if there's any more soundtracks out there.
All right. Carl, do you want to ask one or both of your questions?
Yeah, I'll ask the first one and we'll see if there's time for the second one later. The first one is for Jason. I know that the book deals as well with kind of murder ballads as a genre and as a history and as a lineage. I felt like that was part of something we didn't get as much into in what you've talked about so far. And the thing that particularly occurs to me is the difference between the way that traditional murder ballads work and the way that we receive them when they are kind of in a folk or blues tradition and kind of perceived as authorless and having the murky history and all this kind of thing, as opposed to when they move into the modern singer-songwriter pop and rock context, and the way that we perceive who's responsible for the content at that point, when, you know, and the violence and misogyny that comes along with them, which in some ways get sanded down when it's in that kind of folk context, but is different when it's suddenly like, this is my song about murdering a woman. So I wonder if you could talk about that.
Yeah, well, that is, yeah, it was really strange to kind of look at that period. Like, there was a period between 18 months between, you know, mid 1965 to the end of 1966, where there were literally dozens of versions by, you know, young white garage bands, and, you know, these were pop hits, and there's a quote. Well, the first band to really popularize it in LA was the Byrds, David Crosby specifically, and there's a quote by, you know, one of their mega fans at the time, just saying, you know, giddily, like, this was our favorite song to dance to. And you know, the way Crosby sang it, it just, you know, got everyone up on off their feet. And, you know, in our modern day context, to kind of look at that and say, yeah, all these teenage kids dancing to a song about a guy killing his girlfriend, yeah, it's just sort of bizarre. But yeah, that's where I think, you know, Jimi Hendrix's version becomes so significant, because, you know, he was the first Black artist to do it. And I think, you know, the way Maya was describing, you know, Nina Simone's version, I mean, you know, really kind of infusing Jimmy's experience as a Black man into the song, really, you know, turned it into something completely different, and sort of pointed the way for other people to interpret it later.
Thanks. Eric, do you want to step in with your question? Eric, are you there? Eric Harvey?
Oh, cool. I didn't know if it was other Eric.
No, thank you.
Older Eric. No. This is a question for Mike. I remember back in the blog era, you doing a paper, giving a paper about Hallelujah, Leonard Cohen's Hallelujah, and I may be misremembering it, but it's kind of like Voyage Through Time, and I think you like recorded a cover of Hallelujah like for the presentation. It might have been at PopCon.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, everything's blurry, and it made me think about the distinction between studying a song like that that's sort of branched out over the years, and such that, you know, people know the Jeff Buckley version, or you know through Shrek or whatever, talking about soundtracks. They know it in like a pretty different way than like Leonard Cohen's, you know, social circumstances and his sort of artistic, you know, vision for the song. But it seems like Party in the USA like has, you know, the way you describe it, I'm like, oh yeah, it is of a moment. It's a song that is, you know, of a pop cultural moment, and it's of a political moment. It's like kind of dawn of optimism and you know, cringe, you know, and Obamacare, as the Vulture, you know, might have put it. I was just, you know, thinking, you know, are there can you speak to the difference between like researching songs in those kinds of ways? Like, you know, are there things that you kind of learned, you know, through the process for looking at you know, two different songs, or in different stories?
Yeah, for sure. The Cohen song is interesting because the song itself changes so much over time, with Cohen adding and removing verses, and the sort of the different performances putting such kind of different emotional valences on them. But like Cohen himself is, I guess, relatively static as a image or a performer. he had such a strong romantic image that I think that sort of carries the song with it. Whereas for Party, it really, like, the song is very static. Miley will sub different people out for the Britney song is on or the Jay-Z song is on, like if she's performing with someone, so say Lady Gaga. Apparently, the rumor was that originally she wanted it to be the Kanye song was on instead of the Jay-Z song was on, which would have been a very different experience of the song. So instead, it's kind of about how the context for the song changes, both in terms of like Miley's image, Britney's image, the political image, and so yeah, that was sort of I was interested in that because it sort of shows the freedom that cultural texts have, that they're not fixed, and that both performers and fans can sort of alter that image if there's one that sort of works better for them. And sometimes it gets out of their control and it's terrible, but other times it can be a more positive experience. Yeah.
Cool, thanks. Well, let me ask my question now. So I was thinking about how, Jason, when you were talking about Hey Joe, you kept saying versions rather than covers. And I know that when the song started circulating, cover wasn't really a word, or a term even for folk revivals. And I think folkies often, even after cover became a term, they would reject it. They would just say, this is not a term that I would agree with. But I wonder what started happening when the song started being covered by rockers, and what the Jimi Hendrix version became. Like, was there an original that people would refer to, and would they call those version covers later on, like from the late 60s on? Because that kind of creates a separate, it's a different relationship to the song then, like you're kind of in conversation with a particular performance rather than taking a folk song as your own. And then from some of the answers to my question, like people were saying how like it really matters on the authorship as well, whether Roberts actually can be named an author. Yeah, or is it the question of genre, like Antonio was saying, like is it only for jazz and folk music that you could say that something is a standard versus everything else has covers? Like how does the linguistic terminology work there? Thanks.
Yeah, well, okay, well, there's a lot there, but you will basically, well, one of the crazy parts of the story is that in the mid 60s, there were actually kind of like two strains of Hey Joe on the West Coast and the East Coast. So the West Coast versions were based on Billy Roberts's song that people, from the Greenwich Village scene knew. But then on the East Coast, there was another folk singer named Tim Rose who learned it from a completely different Greenwich Village source, and he gave it more of kind of like a bluesy sound, and he recorded his version for Columbia Records around the same time, and that was the version that Jimmy based his on, which was a little different. But yeah, the whole question of authorship, that was again that was the thing that Dylan completely changed, because he was really the first member of that scene who actually signed a publishing contract, and people started to realize, oh, this is how you can actually make money by writing songs, getting other people to cover them. So Billy Roberts had no idea about that. He was, from the pre-Dylan world where folkies shared their material, and it took several years for kind of the legalities to get sorted out, and that's all covered in the book. But yeah, it's yeah. So yeah, I guess to wrap up my answer in my torturous way here, yeah, I think Hey Joe is really an example of how the music industry eventually figured out how to actually operate and give writers credit for their work, basically. So yeah.
Jason, it sounded like in the book that Billy only registered the song because he like happened to be dating somebody in DC and like swung by the Library of Congress and was just like, sure, why not? Was it that casual? Was that your sense?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that was another person I was fortunate enough to interview, a guy who knew him when he was in DC, and yeah, that's basically all it was. It was, he had this song, and one day he just decided, well, what's the best way? How can I copyright it? So yeah, they just went to the Library of Congress and did a search to see if anyone had done it yet, and no one had. So he filled out the paperwork, and that was really, the really only piece of proof that he had written the song, and he ended up, getting the publishing credit through that. So yeah, very serendipitous.
Before we turn Elena's question over to Maya, I should throw in one related piece from the Hound Dog book, which is so Big Mama Thornton traditionally did not write Hound Dog, did not collect any royalties. But when you learn that part of the story was that Lieber and Staller were taken to meet her and interact with her before they wrote the song Hound Dog, things start to get murkier. And you wonder, had she been afforded better legal representation or any legal representation, if she might have had more of a case for the fact that it was really an attempt to capture her vibe in the nature of a song. So I do think that there's a lot of work to be done with the multiple layers of authorship, because what we've done over time is standardize everything, but it wasn't so standard for quite some time. And that's a telling difference. All right, over to Maya, maybe.
Yeah, Maya, can you answer? And also just to piggyback, like an aspect of the question. I know in Russian there isn't really a word for cover. Original, like at least until the early 90s, it's just a version. There wasn't the distinction between standard and the cover the way it exists in the US. And I wonder what's happening with the French language. How do the Francophone people deal with that?
Yeah, well, in French, a cover is a reprise. And it's interesting because I haven't done a deep dive into the etymology of this, but reprise, I guess it would come from reprendre, which could be to take back, or to get back. It's or to do again, to take again. Um, so yeah, I haven't really thought about that. But I will say in terms of like how it works in France, I mean, singer-songwriters, especially for the chanson generation, I mean, we're much revered. And again, the sort of the intricacy of the lyrics were so important. And so I think giving that credit to the person who created the song is really important. And one reason why I mentioned that Brel wasn't the first one to perform it was because, but he was the one to write it. And that is the version that people know. It's interesting in his sheet music, he writes it from a male perspective, but he also has in parentheses from a female perspective, and that in fact the first recording of it was from a woman. But yeah, I hope that answers sort of the question. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, Carl, do you want to ask your second question? Carl, are you there? I don't think he's there.
He's still listed as being, I mean, he's our host.
Maybe he stepped away for a second.
Well,
I see him, he's waving. I think there's something.
Yeah, he's here.
Oh, he's here. Okay. I can see him. Can he talk?
It looks like he's talking, but I'm not hearing anything.
Are you just on mute, Carl?
His mute button's not on.
Yeah.
Me now?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I just changed my microphone source. Sorry, I was starting to say, that stuff about chanson was really interesting. I'd never thought about how much that tradition really predates the North American or English idea of a singer-songwriter getting solidified, but it's so true that the chanteur does. But what I was going to ask is, for both Maya and Mike, both of your songs, more obviously in Miley's case, but definitely with Ne Me Quitte Pas, they have distinctive kind of national characteristics. I've always thought of, I don't know if you talk about this, Maya, but I've always thought of Ne Me Quitte Pas along with maybe La Vie en Rose and a couple of others as like the most French songs, songs that in some ways, and the irony of it actually being Belgian is all in there and that kind of thing. But, there is that sense of these are nationally representative songs. They're anthems of a sort. And then in both cases, their paths become more complicated as they're adapted and appropriated by people not in that context. And in Miley's case, it starts out with this recognition of ecumenicism, and then her career tells the story of, her appropriations, and for a period kind of identifying herself with a very hip hop oriented kind of dance styles, this kind of thing. So in both cases, there's this interesting complication of nationalism involved. And I wondered if you could both talk about that.
Yeah, sure. I'm glad you pointed out the fact that Brel is Belgian, right? Because we do think of this as a French song from France. And Brel, he spent a lot of time in France. The way he speaks, he sounds like he's from France and not from Belgium. And so yeah, it's interesting when Simone covers it, and a lot of French people in France love her for it. She was very popular. And I really looked for contemporary critiques of her singing it and couldn't really find anything. And so, I'm left with the YouTube discussions. And I think I mentioned a commentary, and there's just these long debates over whether she should be singing it because of her level of French, right? And how heartbreaking that is too, because she spent so much time learning the lyrics. Like she worked with a professor to practice the pronunciation. And you see when you hear her sing it, her hesitancy to, say the French R or the French L or these sorts of things. And so in the second chapter of the book, I do think about, okay, how much of it is people talking about her ability to speak French or to perform in French, and how much is it calling it her being a Black American woman, and particularly that Blackness, because a lot of my previous work on language and identity really Black people in France have a hard time claiming a French identity, even if they're French and have French citizenship or whatnot. And even if they speak French supposedly perfectly with a perfect French Parisian accent or whatnot, because of what these sort of claims that people make on who is actually French, and where does language lie in those claims. So yeah, I think the question of nationality is an important one. But because Simone is able to bring something else to it, especially with her musical ability. And so I spent a lot of time talking about the piano and what that affords her to do as well, and sort of putting her own authentic stamp on the song that goes beyond just the lyrics. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a big part of the Miley song. It seems like the reason it keeps coming into the charts is probably because liberals in the US are like, I need a playlist for my 4th of July barbecue. There just aren't very many liberal patriotic songs that I can think of. And so they sort of reach for Miley. There's been, songs that kind of got co-opted, like Roar or other things that have become sort of liberal patriotic songs in a sense. But Miley's is so explicit. And it's especially striking because, immediately before that, there was a whole batch of patriotic songs about 9/11 that were just very, very conservative, coming from country artists, some of them even kind of comparable to ones that her dad, Billy Ray Cyrus, put out. So it's definitely one of the things that's changed about the context of the song is that in the Obama era, there was sort of a hopefulness about nationalism on the left, that maybe we could be proud of America in an ambiguous way, but sort of leaning more positive. And of course, these days, Miley's compatriots would be sort of very anti that message. So I think one of the things I think that changed about the song, even over those first 4 years, is that she played it a lot more ironically, especially the patriotism. In the 2014 tour video, it's not straight America, yay anymore. It's this weird like foam Mount Rushmore heads and Abe Lincoln in a like 3 a.m. party outfit and stuff. So yeah, I think it's another way the meaning changed over time, and another way the song's problematic for sure.
Thank you. Okay, I think that's it for questions, unless anybody who made a comment wants to make it into a question. But otherwise,
Actually, can I
Yeah.
ask a quick question to Jason? Because I really appreciated how you opened up the book talking about, I guess, Billy Roberts was in Paris, and so
Yeah.
relating the story. And so I'm just curious to know, why did you do that opening? Why did you bring in Paris for like the sort of genesis of this song? Yeah.
Well, that was actually that was a story someone had put. Well, there's a website some guy in Europe has made where he's trying to catalog every version of Hey Joe that he can find. It's crazy. You can see it for yourself, but I that kind of became a good resource for me, just kind of scrolling through the comments he got, and one was from a woman who that was basically her story, that she told that she'd met Billy and he was with his partner, traveling partner, guy named Dino Valenti, who plays a big role in the story as well. But anyway, that was the summer they were kind of doing the troubadour thing around Europe, and yeah, that was her experience of meeting them in Paris, and I just thought it was just a perfect way to kind of set up the story and try to add a little bit of fictional qualities to the book as well. So yeah, thanks. I appreciate you noting that.
I had a quick question for Maya. My first exposure to Jacque Brel, for better or for worse, was the Jacque Brel is Alive and Well and Living in Paris, the stage review, where I think it was all in English. So I looked it up for Ne Me Quitte Pas, and I guess they only included it in the movie version and they didn't translate it. So I don't know if that makes sense to you or not, but it seemed very strange.
Yeah, I do talk about it in the last chapter, because I mean the film version is just bizarre. I highly recommend it, but it's basically adapting the off-Broadway version. And you're right, it doesn't Ne Me Quitte Pas does not show up in the off-Broadway version. It does show in the film. It's the only one in French, and it's like the whole thing is very theatrical with these sort of like body marionette type things, and everything's disjointed. And then you have this close-up shot of Brel in this bar singing the Me Quitte Pas. And then it goes back to the disjointed weirdness of the rest of the film. And it's the only part of the film that I actually like, and it's the only part that's really Brel. Why they did it, it's unclear, but it's the only saving grace, in my opinion, of that film.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, everybody. It was super, very enlightening discussion in different geographies and languages. Thank you very much. Please don't leave as we stop the recording.